So I was watching The Robot Revolution, the season 2 opener of Doctor Who, and I was struck by Belinda, the reluctant new companion. I was struck by her reaction to this moment.
You're not real, actual robots, are you? Because that is just ridiculous.
Obviously, she's surprised and a bit overwhelmed, and she's thinking about her family, but apart from that, she's taking this pretty much in her stride.
Tell him he owes me 50 quid.
And it reminded me of an issue that Doctor Who has had for several years now, and I really want to talk about it. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and before we dive into the main topic of this video, to celebrate a new season, to celebrate a new companion with Belinda, I've got a promotion on my Patreon, where paid members for the first time get 20% off their first month with the coupon code Belinda20. Being a patron means that you get early access to edited videos, you also get your name in the credits, you'll get a verbal shout out as well, and you can also get access to a Mr. TARDIS Discord server, where I'm going to be hosting voice chats with people in the server to talk about the latest Doctor Who episodes. This offer expires at the end of April, so like I said, Belinda20 to get 20% off your first paid month. So yeah, the Robot Revolution opens, we meet Belinda, we're reintroduced to the Doctor, who decides to do a power outage at a major hospital.
Sorry.
God, talk about the oncoming storm, the body count must be immense. And before Belinda knows it, the Miss Belinda Chandra bots arrive at her house, blast through her back door, that sounds wrong, vaporize the cat, take the star certificate that has her name on it, and take her back to their home planet. And Belinda is understandably scared and confused, but there's no, like, robots, aliens, home planet, spaceship, what is going on here? And it made me think, does humanity in the Whoniverse in the present day, 2025, do they know about aliens? And this may seem like a ridiculous question in a bubble, but that's the thing. If you actually have a broader scope for the question, it becomes a fascinating contradiction and also a really interesting look at how a show's ethos and approach to world building has changed over the past 20 years. Firstly, let's go back to the classic series, with their contemporary stories basically establishing that, with the exception of a handful of individuals who have had contact with aliens and contact with the Doctor and UNIT and such, aliens are basically an unknown thing in the world.
Alien invaders? Little blue men with 3 heads.
Compared to modern Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who spends a lot more time in off-world locations. So you don't really have to deal with the idea of, does modern day humanity know about aliens and extraterrestrials and stuff? However, when classic Doctor Who is on Earth, it's contained enough that there is a level of plausible deniability to it, with very few exceptions that do go unexplained, but there's so few of them that you can basically ignore them. In the classic series, there's very few alien invasion stories that do encompass whole countries or even the whole planet. The first big one is the Dalek invasion of Earth, but that's set in the future. That's set in the year 2000 or the year 2150, depending on what version you're watching, so they can kick that can down the road. They don't really have to think about it. But in terms of big-scale modern-day invasions, there's The Invasion, but that was the Cybermen coming out of the sewers and people were knocked out due to this signal being broadcast, so there could be a collective amnesia around that, and the people who do remember just could think that there's something coming from the sewers that's man-made. Same for the War Machines. There's Votan in the post office tower, but that's relatively contained enough to those London streets, and those who did know about it, it's, you know, it's a new invention created by mankind. That's not an alien threat. Same thing for the Web of Fear and the Yeti in the Underground, but London has been evacuated, so the streets are empty and it's just the military who are there to combat the threat. And that's one of the big things about the classic series that allows them to have the plausible deniability of whether or not there is alien or extraterrestrial life in the Whoniverse in the classic series, and that's UNIT. They are able to essentially isolate everything and clean up all of the mess after it's done. Day of the Daleks, that's isolated at a country home. The Sea Devils, that's a naval base. Invasion of the Dinosaurs, once again, London's been evacuated. The very few that contradict this are Spearhead from Space, where the Autons, they smash through those windows and start killing members of the public. That's never really explained how that gets covered up. And also the first 4th Doctor story, Robot, where you've got this giant robot stomping around the streets. There's no civilians in sight, but I don't know how you cover that up from a distance. It's why the base Under Siege format of classic Doctor Who in particular is so simple and efficient when it comes to the world building of the Whoniverse, because you have these isolated characters who are trapped in one location or in a very limited location, and then once the threat's been dispelled with, there's no threat to the greater population, and also maybe there's some amnesia, or maybe there's just a collective agreement to never speak of these events again. Now, I'm not here to give the classic series writers too much credit. The reason they didn't do these massive expansive invasion stories is because they couldn't afford to do it. But you don't have to worry so much about that because they spend significantly more time off-world in the classic series. You don't really have to bother about the consequences of the world building and how a different society responds to alien invasions that way. However, there's a massive difference when you get to the show's revival in 2005. Firstly, you do immediately have that issue with Rose, where the Autons start killing people in the streets again, you know, very much like 1970s. But then the Doctor and Rose, they disappear for a whole year. However, it's not long until Russell T Davies plants his flag and announces what is the intention of humanity's relationship with aliens in this revival.
Destroyed as a UFO crash lands in central London.
With Aliens of London and World War III, Russell T Davies starts effectively world building in this modern version of the Whoniverse to establish just how much Earth knows about extraterrestrial life. While the actual aliens of London themselves are not seen by the general public, they're restrained to Downing Street. There's the space pig in the spaceship that the general population does not see, but the episode ends with Mickey holding up a newspaper, and it seems that humanity have just collectively agreed that it was a big hoax. And then it seems like it's just business as usual now. Dalek is set in an underground base, the long game is set in the year 200,000, so we don't need to think about that. Father's Day is set in the recent past. However, the timey-wimey effects of the Reapers and the paradoxes means that, with the exception of the death of Pete Tyler, everything else around that day is essentially a mystery. Like, people lose their memories. That's the implication. Everything about the Empty Child is just caught up in the mess of the Blitz. Boomtown, I assume, is just written off as a freak act of nature with the Cardiff earthquake. And then the Parting of the Ways, once again, set far in the future. However, interestingly, there is a loose thread in the Parting of the Ways where the Daleks go to Earth of the far future and just start bombing and destroying and reshaping whole continents.
Linda, what's happening on Earth?
They're bombing whole continents. Europa, Pacifica, the new American alliance. Australia's just gone.
I have created heaven on Earth.
That's never followed up on. Is humanity dead? It's interesting that this series has an episode set at the year 5 billion in the future of humanity, because by the looks of the Parting of the Ways, we don't make it past 200,100. But then there's a noticeable, deliberate pivot with the Christmas invasion, where the Sycorax come down, everyone sees the spaceship, there's the blood control, 1/3 of the population are about to jump off the roofs, including the incestuous royal family.
It's hardly the Queen's speech. I'm afraid that's been cancelled. Did we ask about the royal family? Oh, they're on the roof.
Harriet Jones with Torchwood destroys the Sycorax spaceship, and at the end of the episode, the 10th Doctor triumphantly says,
"This is a brand new planet Earth. No denying the existence of aliens now. Everyone saw it. Everything's new."
So the new status quo of Earth after the Christmas invasion is that humanity knows that aliens exist and that some of them are a threat. Now, you still get your small-scale Earth stories where the threat is isolated so it doesn't spread out to the larger population. Stories like School Reunion, where it's just one school. The Idiot's Lantern, where everyone watching the coronation presumably just has their memories erased. Fear Her is just set on a street and the status quo is restored at the end, except everybody forgot who Hugh Edwards was.
Oh, there's a mystery man. He's picked up the flame. No one wants to stop him.
And the closest thing to a big-scale alien invasion in that series is Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel, which takes place in a parallel world. Until you get to the finale, where ghosts turn up and people just start accepting them and ingratiating them into pop culture, which is something Russell T Davies loves doing.
I don't care if you have come back from the grave. Get out of my pub!
And then in Doomsday, all of the Cybermen invade, they break into people's homes, there's Daleks in the sky. It's later referred to as the Battle of Canary Wharf. So what you get now in the Whoniverse is that you will have these small-scale alien invasion stories, but every so often there'll be this big bombastic show of force from extraterrestrials that causes humanity to take notice. And this actually leads very well into Series 3, where you have Harold Saxon, who is running for Prime Minister on the promise that all of these big extraterrestrial things will stop, or he'll be able to fight back against them, if he's elected.
Just a few years ago, this world was so small, and then they came. Big Ben destroyed all those ghosts, the Christmas star that came to kill, and the government told you nothing. Not Harold Saxon.
The next Christmas special is The Runaway Bride, where you've got the Rachnos star destroying London, but then Harold Saxon takes it down.
Orders for Mr. Saxon. Fire at will.
And all of these big public alien invasions do just become parts of life for humanity. We very rarely get a big on-the-ground look at what's happening, with the exception of Love and Monsters, where there's a flashback montage to the main character of that story, Elton, experiencing all of these invasions, punctuated with Wilfred Mott in Series 4,
Aliens, don't you dare!
where he is wanting to see these invasions, he's wanting to meet these aliens, and he's just there on the hill now with his telescope, missing the adipose spaceship behind him. But the Noble family, Donna, Sylvia, Wilfred, they know about aliens, so when there is a big invasion like with the Sontarans with the Atmos system, they can just leap right into action instead of the whole, oh, do aliens exist? I don't believe you, which would have happened back in Series 1 or the classic series. This is even brought up in Torchwood when Captain Jack is recruiting Gwen. He refers to the Battle of Canary Wharf.
What's it gonna take for you people? What about the Battle of Canary Wharf? A Cyberman in every home. The 21st century is when it all changes. And you gotta be ready.
It's these collective experiences that unites the, quote, Children of Time in the Series 4 finale, where there's planets in the sky that everybody's aware of, all the world is celebrating when Earth gets put back to its normal place. As Russell T Davies leaves and Stephen Moffat comes in, something very interesting happens that does shift the status quo, and it's something that people hardly talk about or seem to acknowledge, but it did happen. In The Next Doctor, there's a massive stomping cyber king going around Victorian London. That is something that you cannot cover up. Gallifrey appears in the sky in The End of Time. The Atraxi broadcasts its Prisoner Zero message to everyone on the planet. But in the two-parter, The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone, we've got a new Doctor, we've got a new companion, we've got a new showrunner, and it seems that one of the mysteries is, why does Amy Pond not know about extraterrestrial life?
What would I know about the Daleks?
Planets in the sky, you don't forget that. Tell me you remember the Daleks.
4 seasons and change of these big, massive, huge-scale events which even have their own in-universe names like the Battle of Canary Wharf, but Amy doesn't seem to remember or know about any of it, and it's to do with the crack in time in her wall, which seems to be absorbing the memories of her experiences of these. But it's not just her, it turns out it's collectively the whole planet. That's why a great big cyber king can stomp around Victorian London and no one even remembers.
Time can be rewritten. Time can be unwritten. Giant Cyberman walks over all of Victorian London and no one even remembers.
Stephen Moffat clearly had a very different ethos for the Whoniverse than Russell T Davies did. That's not a critique, that he's just a different person. So rather than just hitting the reset button at the beginning of Series 5, he uses Series 5 to sort of backdoor his way into a soft reboot. With the cracks in time, with the Big Bang 2, the Doctor essentially erases alien knowledge from humanity. So while the Moffat era does spend a lot more time outside of contemporary Earth, when it does revisit that setting, it does seem that humanity are encountering alien threats or the knowledge of extraterrestrials for the first time, in stories like Night Terrors, in stories like Closing Time. And while you do have these stories with the much broader canvas like The Power of Three, it seems that is something that you can just brush under the rug, like that could have been a big Cube-related marketing scheme, although he did borrow notes from Russell T Davies in how they get incorporated in pop culture.
I sent you out to sell as many cubes as you could. You've made a right hash of it, haven't you?
And we've essentially now gone back to the classic era where humanity has the knowledge of extraterrestrials kept away from them, mainly by UNIT. The idea of memory and losing memory and having these experiences withheld from you is a pretty consistent through line throughout Stephen Moffat's work on the series. You have the memory wiping of the Black Archive at UNIT, which is an underground organisation underneath the Tower of London, you know, very much hidden away from the public. They don't have a big base or anything that the public know about. And the Doctor even goes as far as to wipe existence of himself from historical record. So now the series returns to its traditional story format where you've got these isolated moments of like alien invasion or resistance or whatever. Stories like The Caretaker or Flatline, very isolated. Humanity forgets the events of In the Forest of the Night just like audiences did, and God knows how humanity reacted to Dark Water and Death in Heaven. I don't know, that's just out of sight, out of mind. And this pattern essentially holds true for several years. I'm just going through the episode list now to sort of help with my own memory. Zygon Invasion, Zygon Inversion, Memory Wipes, you can sort of brush that under the rug. Face the Raven, that's literally a trap street. That's like the premise of the story. The Pilot, once again, very contained, same as Knock Knock, that's in a single student accommodation. The Monk Trilogy, that ends with a memory wipe. And then we get to the Chibnall era, and there's only really one big full-scale invasion of contemporary Earth, and that's the Sontarans in The Vanquishers, and also War of the Sontarans, but that does get erased from memory and erased from time. But then again, maybe the Sontaran invasion, that also gets erased from time, because we never really got proper clarity on the state of the universe after the events of Flux. Like, it's implied that a massive chunk of the universe got destroyed by the Flux, and then we just never really follow up on it, so the implication is that either, yes, all those people did die, all those civilizations and galaxies did get destroyed, or they somehow got brought back and we were never told. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this lack of clarity is also coinciding with the strange nature of UNIT in present-day Doctor Who, where UNIT seem absolutely fine, it's business as usual under the Capaldi era, but at the beginning of the Jodie Whittaker era, she tries to call in assistance from UNIT and she's told
all unit operations were put on hold following financial disputes
and subsequent funding withdrawal by the UK's major international partners. So UNIT has seemingly been disbanded, but to be fair, in terms of like a practical storytelling capacity, there is no massive big invasion that needs to be hidden away from public sight. At the beginning of the next series, the Doctor and the fam go to see MI6, so they sort of fill in that role there. But then after that, Revolution of the Daleks happens, and there's public demonstrations and recordings of these new Dalek defense drones, which, to be fair, the population don't know that these are aliens. But then those same drones, live on BBC News, kill the Prime Minister, and there's battles in the streets and a big, like, invasion fleet.
Exterminate! Humanity will be exterminated!
And the episode ends with the Trump allegory, Jack Robertson, giving an interview to Emily Maitlis on the news, saying that he stopped the invasion. And then it just gets messier in Flux, where UNIT are brought back in Survivors of the Flux, only to be disbanded again, and Kate Stewart has to go on the run. And then we fast forward a few episodes later to The Power of the Doctor, and there's a new UNIT HQ in central London that ends up getting almost immediately destroyed. And then fast forward again to the new Bad Wolf 14th, 15th Doctor era, and now UNIT have this massive, beautiful building in central London, but do the population know what's in there? Is that just a big glam new building that no one's asked any questions about? With the Meep landing in the Starbeast, it seems that humanity don't know about aliens and extraterrestrials because of just how they approach the situation. There's a big mass hysteria event in the Giggle, but possibly they could have lost their memories of it after the Giggle was taken away. And then for the 15th Doctor's era, when he meets Ruby Sunday, there's no mention of aliens, there's no mention of extraterrestrials or anything like that. Ruby, and basically the show by proxy, approach the 15th Doctor and the TARDIS and everything with a big sense of awe. I don't know about aliens, I don't know about other planets, this is all completely new information to the Whoniverse. All of humanity dies in Empire of Death, but then they're brought straight back, and I assume they just don't recall the experience. Which leads us now nicely to the Robot Revolution, and those robots breaking into Belinda's house and her not being too flummoxed by this. I'm aware that I'm massively overthinking this subject, but it is something that I've kind of pondered for a while now. And I'm not here to say that Russell T Davies hasn't thought about the world building. I'm not here to say Chris Chibnall has ruined the world building of Doctor Who. This is just a natural consequence of having different writers with different visions and ethoses for the show running it for the past 20 years. And because the show has been running non-stop for those 20 years, it means that this question has never really explicitly been asked recently. As in asked in the context of the show itself and clarified. And this may sound like me nitpicking, but I do think that an answer to this question is pretty important for the context of the show, just so that we know where these characters' heads are at when we first meet them. It's about the world building and the frameworks and the lived experiences of these characters, whether it be Rose not experiencing anything like that prior to 2005, or Martha Jones, who is kind of on the outside of this, but her cousin Adiola disappeared during the Battle of Canary Wharf.
I had a cousin, Adiola. She worked at Canary Wharf. She never came home.
Barefoot on the moon.
Or you could subvert this entirely with Donna, who somehow misses all of these extraterrestrial happenings, or Amy Pond, where outside influences have erased her memory of it. Basically, my point is, Ruby and Belinda should, by definition of their characters, have very different reactions to encountering aliens and robots and spaceships and stuff for the first time. That's just a consequence of them being two different people. But their framework, unless very deliberately stated otherwise, should be the same. And without that framework, it just leaves me kind of confused as to what the state of the Whoniverse is. Stories that take place in the past or in the future or off-world, whatever, you have freedom to do whatever you want with the consequences of those adventures. But the stories set on contemporary Earth, especially if you want to have a unit family, if you don't want to have like a family unit for Ruby as well with her adopted family, then we kind of need to know where their heads are at. When it comes to the issues that I have with this current run of Doctor Who, this particular one doesn't even like crack the top 10 or the top 20 or whatever, but it is just this little thing at the back of my mind which, whenever I'm reminded of it in the show, like I was at the beginning of the Robot Revolution, it does just sort of remind me that there's a lack of housekeeping with the world building in the Whoniverse. And I'm really hoping that it's clarified or resolved or even just reset so we can start another template. I don't know. Either way, am I the only one who's thought of this? Am I the only one who cares about this? You folks in the comment section, you've got to let me know down below. Comment down below, and while you're there, hit the like button. It really, really helps me out. Also, subscribe if you haven't already to the Mr. TARDIS channel. Like I said, I've got a Patreon. I've also got YouTube memberships as well. Thank you so much for watching my unhinged ramblings. And folks, I'll see you all next time.
It's them aliens, I'll bet my pension.